This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's unsupervised learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Unsupervised Learning Podcast. And today I'm here with my friend, Alex Feinberg. Sometimes I say people are my friend, and I've never really met them, but I have met Alex. He does live in Austin, so this is someone I've met in the flesh, and I can confirm that he does look the way he looks online. Not in like all the gory detail, like we didn't go into that closely, but Alex is, he's the real deal. He is, what I know Alex from, and I will let him introduce myself though, is pictures of his, quite toned body juxtaposed against very delicious looking cut steaks and vegetables and other sorts of things. I think very, very interesting juxtaposition. And I want to talk to Alex, just so you guys know. He's not just one of those gurus that just comes out of the blue. He has an interesting life story. He did work in tech. He was a professional athlete. There's a lot of interesting, zigs and zags in his life that I think we could all learn from, especially those of us who, have a difficult time, living in the conventional treadmill. I'm definitely one of those people. And I follow Alex on Twitter. And I follow his work partly just because, I want to get his insights on succeeding outside of that sort of box, so to speak. So, Alex, can you introduce yourself? Tell the listener and the viewers what you're all about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Razib. This is going to be awesome. So behind the abs, there's actually a story of an interesting person with a very different background than what a lot of people might expect, looking at someone who ostensibly is a gym rat meathead. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, wanting to be a professional athlete. I grew up to upper middle class parents who worked corporate jobs, because I wasn't around super rich people, I actually kind of thought that there were two paths as an adult. You either had a job like everybody else, or you got rich being an athlete or an entertainer. And I decided I didn't want a job like everybody else, so I was going to try to get rich as an athlete or an entertainer. I worked very hard in the weight room, on the baseball field, to try to get as good as I could get at the single skill that I identified as what could possibly make me unique and stand out in the world. Now, I wasn't actually that good at baseball when I decided that I was going to work really hard at it. I just decided that I had to be good at it and I was going to make it happen no matter what. So years of diligent effort ultimately made me into a pretty decent athlete, where I was getting invited to play in national level showcases in front of Major League Baseball scouts, getting scholarship offers from Stanford's, Vanderbilt's of the world, as well as getting recruited by Ivy League schools. And ultimately, I decided to accept the scholarship offer that I got from Vanderbilt because I wanted to leave California and have an opportunity to compete in the Southeastern Conference, which was the best baseball conference, still is, in the country. So I packed my stuff, went to go compete in the SEC, and when I got on campus, I came to the end of the road that my logical left brain mind had, basically perceived the world to exist in, where I started realizing that logic and knowledge and awareness of facts actually helped in the classroom a lot more than it helped in the baseball field. And if I wanted to be successful on the baseball field, I had to learn how to leverage my intuition. I had to learn how my coaches thought. I had to learn how my teammates thought. I had to learn how scouts thought. If I wanted to get drafted by them, if I wanted to have their respect, and ultimately if I wanted to be able to cut through the stress that was competing in front of 7,000 people on an SEC road night. And so I learned how to listen to my body. I learned that, no matter how much I analyze it, I can't figure out why I can throw the ball accurately across the infield. I just have to trust my intuition. No matter how much I think about it, I can't logically tell you why I can get my hands inside on an inside fastball. I just have to trust that I can do it. And if I try to add a logical process to it, it's just going to perform worse. And so I had to trust myself if I wanted to succeed. And I had to develop a sort of arrogance about me where, I don't need to fact check this. It's just going to work, because the only alternative was embarrassing myself in front of thousands of people in public. One of the observations that I made when I was at Vanderbilt was that good-looking people are treated a lot better in life. People who are in shape. I noticed that most people thought through heuristic shortcuts, and one of the common heuristic shortcuts that I noticed replicated over and over again was good-looking people were treated as being more responsible, harder working, and more trustworthy. And I noticed I would do this myself, where I would look at somebody who's presenting to our class in finance. We'd bring in a banker from Wall Street. He'd talk about CDOs or whatever, and I would say, well, I don't really know what he's talking about, but I'd buy what he's selling. And I thought, well, if my brain is steering me down this road, chances are 9 out of 10 people's brains are steering them down this road too. And so when I got done playing baseball, I decided that I wanted to have every advantage, every heuristic advantage that I could possibly have. I wanted to be in shape so people would give me the benefit of the doubt. And ultimately, after working for a little bit at a global macro hedge fund in Hong Kong, I decided that the tech sector was going to take off, because I thought that central banks were going to keep interest rates low for a very long period of time, which ended up happening. And so I moved back home to the San Francisco Bay Area and decided I was going to elevator pitch my way into Google using the shortcuts that I learned on the baseball field. Namely, I was going to wear a custom tailored suit. I was going to speak firmly and aggressively and confidently. I was going to introduce myself to a hiring manager and get a job in sales. And people thought that was crazy, but ultimately I figured out how to navigate through LinkedIn, get my 15 seconds to elevator pitch myself in front of a hiring manager, and ultimately got myself a 6-figure job at Google just by talking and looking good in a custom tailored suit. And so I got my foot in the door in corporate America. After spending years in there, I noticed that there were mechanisms of exploitation that I came to realize were beyond the perceptive abilities of many of my colleagues. I continued to train hard every day in corporate America, because I didn't want to cede, emotional sovereignty and my sense of self-worth to a third-party corporation who was trying to get me to evaluate myself based on their evaluations of me. I realized that was incredibly dangerous for my own self-worth, for my own life. And so I made sure to continue to compete with myself in the gym, because the promotional path that Google offered me just wasn't enticing enough for me to want to build my identity around it. So I kept training hard for years. I was not willing to forego eating delicious food, because I love eating. It's like one of my favorite things to do, if not my favorite thing to do in life. And I realized after several years that if I just train to be an athlete and I eat protein dominant real food, I don't have to count calories. I don't have to go hungry. And I can actually get better abs than I ever had as a college or professional athlete, eating thousands of calories a day, eating dessert, eating carbs, eating what most people would consider to be cheat meals: pizza, tacos, burgers, fried chicken. Most meals, literally, you see my Twitter feed, this is actually what I'm eating all the time. And, look like, hope I don't knock my camera over. Yep, looking like that year round, right? I don't cut. I don't count calories. I don't weigh things. It's very intuitive. I decided that my intuition knew what I needed to eat more than an app or some third-party coach who didn't know me. I drew upon my baseball experience to dig deep and find that arrogance within me, where I believed that my body just knew what to eat. I should be eating carbs now. I should be eating protein now. I should be eating this now. I should be drinking water now. And it just ended up working, and getting ripped beyond my wildest imagination was easier than I ever thought possible, doing less training than I ever thought possible. And I thought to myself in 2017, if there's one way I could change the world, it wouldn't be through selling ads at Google or helping Google grow. It would be through teaching people how easy fitness could be. And so I ended up leaving Google in 2017 and joined a crypto exchange in 2018. And at the crypto exchange, I realized that if I wanted to maintain a high-paying sales job in crypto, I actually needed a large Twitter following because everybody who has a high paying job in crypto seems to have a large Twitter following. And so I committed myself to building my Twitter account. And I found in 2019 that it was much easier to build that account around fitness than it was around crypto. And so I just kept posting all my meals, posting a lot of shirtless pics, basically sharing with people that you don't have to do all the dumb things that a bunch of midwit IQ people insist you do in order to look good with your shirt off. Here's how I do it. And since then, I've been fortunate enough to sell recipe books, fat loss books, training guides to thousands of my followers. Been able to work closely with people either one-on-one or in a group setting. Helped hundreds of people transform their bodies with less effort than they ever thought was possible. And more recently, people are realizing that the cheat codes that I use to navigate the fitness world also apply in the corporate world. So I've recently started helping people with salary negotiations, helping people realize that, you can probably get paid $50,000 more for doing the exact same job by simply positioning yourself better to a different company. Let me help you do it. Check this framework out. I've had multiple people, in the last year reach out and say, hey, I'm working less than I was in my previous job. I'm making $50,000 more. Thank you so much. You changed my life. And so this is the Alex Feinberg key. It's, performance, efficiency, and intelligence. Performance, intelligence, efficiency, if you want it to spell pie, right? A lot of things in life can be done a lot better if you think a little bit outside the box and realize that linear progress isn't necessarily the best path to get where you want to go. You can find corners to cut. You can, reconstruct, reorder some dots, and ultimately achieve your goals with less effort than you ever thought was possible.
All right. So, Alex, you are very, we have a wide range of podcast guests here. You're very articulate. I'll put it that way. You know what you want to say, and you say it very well. I'm asking you here, in terms of, your advice, your coaching, all of these things that you do to optimize. You said intelligence. Um, I mean, what if you're stupid? I mean, can any human do this, or is this really something that like higher IQ people that are kind of like higher up there and the cognitive abilities can really optimize, or do you think it's applicable to everybody? Everybody wants to be look like you, Alex, but do you have like a unique suite of characteristics that allow? For example, like I know you say that you have these cheat codes and you don't count calories, you don't do all these other things. The people who do those, they do a lot of cognitive management, right? So is your technique much lower cognitive load, I guess is what you're saying? Is it more accessible that way?
It's much lower cognitive load, right? It's almost the challenge for people doing it is, you've seen the midwit bell curve meme, right? Where the people on the right end of the bell curve like use their intuition, the people on the left end of the bell curve use their intuition, and the people in the center of the bell curve explain why you can't use your intuition, and they end up trying much harder for worse results, right? So it's almost like if you're on either end of the bell curve, right? If you're either a standard deviation and a half above the mean or a standard deviation and a half below the mean, what I say makes sense. And I actually think the truth behind that is, are you able to tap into the right side of your brain, right? Because the people who are able to tap into the right side of their brain, I believe, I haven't studied this in any detail, but I believe the people who are able to tap into the right side of their brain have a greater variance in their IQ. So they're more likely to be represented on the extremely low and the extremely high end of the IQ curve. And it's the people who cannot tap into their intuition, that think that the world can only be logically explained and always be logically explained. These are the people who will look at what I'm doing and think, oh, this can't be real. Or they'll think, oh, he's an outlier. This doesn't work. It's like, well, telling me I'm an outlier doesn't explain my results. It just says that you don't want to come up with an explanation for my results.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. You talk a fair amount about corporate life, and you had a job at Google. Most of us have not had a job at Google. I have other friends who've had jobs at Google. I think in normie America, shall we say, middle America, having a job at Google, ooh, that's kind of prestigious. And, people are like, oh, my nephew has a job at Google. These are the kind of things people say. It's like, my nephew's a doctor, let's set doctor aside. As a young Jewish man, I'm sure with a Chinese mother, you probably had some questions about becoming a doctor at some point. Not to stereotype, but you know what I'm saying. I'm going to get canceled for like the 40th time for saying that, but whatever. So you worked at Google. Tell me about Google. I mean, I know some of the things you think at Google because I follow your social media feed. But tell the listener, tell the viewers about Google and what it's like actually working there now. Like not 20 years ago, but like, within the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's a very different experience for me going in and coming out. So when I joined Google in the fall of 2011, it was still mostly a libertarian company. Um, Larry and Sergey were still in control of how things worked. They hadn't passed the reins to Sundar. The organization hadn't expanded to such a size that they were forced to recruit from cookie cutter backgrounds almost exclusively. So they still had to have some degree of uniqueness, or they were still small enough to operate with some degree of uniqueness in their recruiting mechanisms. And it very much was an open, free thinking company. There were elements of bureaucratic challenges. There were a lot of processes in place because it was still a large company by 2011. And so there still was bureaucracy that made it frustrating, but ultimately there was logic behind what was going on. And if you made a logical point, you were almost always listened to. You couldn't always make your point logically, but somebody would always consider what you said. And then, that existed for a couple of years, but the company kept getting bigger. And by 2014, it sort of felt like this is sort of like getting to be like a glorified Microsoft. Like I don't actually know what the difference between working for Microsoft and working for Google is. They're starting, they gave us good perks and they still give us good perks, but they're methodically trying to cheapen the perks that they're giving us. They're trying to substitute in cheaper vegetable oils for the olive oil that they would give us at lunch. They're trying to reduce the amount of bacon that they're giving us at breakfast. And I sound, this might sound spoiled at the same time, like I'm an employee evaluating my entire compensation. So I accepted the job understanding that my compensation would be my salary, my equity, plus perks. And, they might be increasing my salary, they might be increasing my equity, but if they're gutting the perks, all of that needs to be considered in my all-in compensation. If they're putting their finger on the scale like that. And so, I started paying attention to various narratives that became misaligned with reality, where people saying, oh, we're not a small company anymore. We need to start making cutbacks for Wall Street. And, I have corporate finance literacy. And I'm like, for Wall Street, like nobody can unseat you. 3 founding members of the company have a majority of the voting shares. So as long as Larry, Sergey, and Eric don't want to replace the board's not going to get replaced. So anything you say about Wall Street wants this, Wall Street wants that, it's like, yeah, it might affect the share price of the company, but a lot of those shares are owned by those 3 people. So when you're talking about Wall Street wants this, Wall Street wants that, it's like, who is Wall Street? It's you guys. And so, a lot of narratives would come up, oh, we need to make cutbacks for this and that. It's like, you guys are growing revenue and margins, and you're like a $40 billion company. What kind of insanity is this? And I started to realize that I really, really liked a vast majority of the people that I work with. I thought that, coming in and through a majority of my time at Google hired phenomenal individuals, like good dudes, good chicks, like cool, smart people. But I thought that, over the years, the hiring bar definitely, got lower. And what a lot of corporations do, and Google certainly did, is they attract weak-minded people. And so I say this lovingly, like I like the people who they attracted, but the types of people who would believe narratives that were completely contradictory to what the balance sheet and the income statement are saying are mentally weak people. And so the corporate narratives are designed to not be true. And this isn't just a Google thing. This is an every company thing. They will say things that are literally not true, that if you can just count on your fingers, they're not true. but 4 out of 5 employees are going to be too mentally weak to read the writing on the wall. And that's why corporations will be able to consistently lie to their employees, because their employees just can't stomach the reality of their circumstances. And so, it was this dishonesty that led me to never celebrating a promotion. I never wanted to be under the mental or emotional control of an entity that I was convinced was designed to exploit me and everybody that they employed as much as possible. There was a lawsuit about wage collusion by Google, I think Intel, maybe Apple, a couple other Silicon Valley companies, and it's like how this didn't change the perception of 100% of Google employees is beyond me. Like, you don't just accidentally, get involved in a multi-million-dollar settlement that's designed to erode the salaries of your employees unless there's, I don't know, something bad about the DNA and your own wiring, something malignant about your desires. And so for me, somebody who's a little bit cynical and a little bit suspicious, it's like, okay, I get what their MO is. If they're willing to do illegal things to shave a couple points off of what they're paying people, they're damn sure able to do every legal thing possible to maximize the output and minimize the compensation for their employees. So I came to view the world like that, and I came to see a lot of the games that they played and understand why they were so effective and how they were able to manipulate so many of my colleagues for so many years. And ultimately, I left. Was able to negotiate a favorable raise at the next job that I took, and ultimately spent my entire surplus of free hours trying to build revenue streams independent of a corporate entity, because that was the only thing that I thought would allow me to live the life that I wanted to live. I just didn't see it possible through third-party employment. And I don't even make more now than I would be making if I stayed at Google, but I'm working for myself. I'm setting my own hours. I don't have to go through quarterly or annual performance reviews. I don't have to wait until somebody says I did a good job, right? I have revenue diversity through my clients to where if one person pisses me off, the greatest revenue concentration that I have with any single client constitutes about 10% of my revenue. So unless there's a mass collusion against me, if I piss one person off, worst case, it's going to be 10% of my income, not more. And so this is all the freedom that I thought was absolutely necessary, that I attained due to the anguish that I felt sitting in a corporate desk, feeling punished for being smart enough to see through the lies of a large company.
Mm-hmm. So we heard about your time at Google, and I'm not gonna lie, this is not the first time I have heard this from somebody who's worked at Google across this time period. The transformation of, what was really an entrepreneurial outfit to something that's I don't know, much more corporate, in a traditional way, bureaucratic. You compare it to Microsoft. Like, I do have to say, in some ways, from what I've heard, Microsoft's culture was definitely had a nadir. Maybe in the end of the 2000s, near the tail end of the bomber years, and it's kind of come back. Arguably, Google is where Microsoft was as we're recording right now. They just came out with Bard, which is frankly a really shitty AI chatbot. Compared to Microsoft's Bing chatbot and definitely ChatGPT's open source chatbot. So it's just strange for someone of my generation, I'm a little older than you, to see Google become this sort of also ran behind the times. And I've gotten some feedback actually from social media privately, Google employees, and they're basically like, look, we're like subject to bureaucratic sclerosis. We can't get anything done. You should be impressed with what we do get done, with the amount of reviews and approvals and everything that we have to do. So you stripped all of that away, and now you're doing what you're doing now. You're coaching, you're giving advice, you're consulting as an individual. Tell me about that. Insofar as, is this more like when you were a professional athlete? How did you have the skills to do this? Because this is not everybody.
Well, I try to pay attention to what people want. right? And I try to be malleable, right? Because you can see the world for what you want it to be, or you can see the world for what it is. And I always thought that the benefit of physical training is twofold. Number one, you make your body stronger, but number two, you learn how to grapple with things that make you physically uncomfortable. And the things that make you physically uncomfortable are very similar to the things that make you emotionally uncomfortable. And a lot of times people have challenges coming to terms with reality because they don't want to ingest it. Very similar to the experiences I talked to you about with my Google colleagues. People will avoid seeing the writing on the wall because the writing on the wall doesn't tell them what they want it to tell them. And so I always tell people that if you can push yourself through a tough set in the weight room, you can read the writing on the wall. When the writing on the wall says something, read it. And what that's going to allow you to do is it is going to allow you to make more intelligent decisions by offering products that people actually want, and by not pursuing pathways that actually have dead ends.
Well, so why do you think most people? I mean, okay, so this is like a philosophical question. I actually don't know what you would say to this, Alex. Um, Most people, you have work, you're generating revenue partly because so many people are in dead ends. So many people don't know what to do and how to do it. Just let's go to the macro scale a little bit in the social context. Why do you have this opportunity? What is wrong with our culture? Like, where does this ennui come from? Why are we in dead ends? This is like a big, big question, but I want to know what you think because you are a very focused person. From what I know about you, just even when you talk, when you talk to you in real life, you focus on the person and you're very direct. Whereas I feel like our society is not like that. Is it the collapse of the churches? Is it the lack of institutional faith? Like, what is it? Where's this coming from?
No, it's because people are stupid. And the reason
Okay.
no, and the reason people are stupid is because school doesn't train them how to think. School trains people how to regurgitate. I tweeted this a couple of weeks ago. A vast majority of people say the dumbest things that you could possibly comprehend because they don't realize that there's a such thing as understanding an intelligent thought and articulating it. All they know how to do is mimic intelligence because school teaches students how to mimic intelligence. That's what happens when an English teacher assigns you a 1,200 word essay, right? You use larger words than you need to convey an idea more verbosely than you would do in a commercial setting, and you end up speaking very indirectly, beating around the bush, and it ultimately ends up clouding your thought process. And that is what gets you good grades. And so people go through 12 years and they've only learned how to write for a third party or think for a third party. They've never learned how to think an intelligent thought for themselves. And so by the time most people get out of the university system, they can't recognize what intelligent thought structure is. Just like as a personal trainer, I can look at your squat form and say, this guy's squatting like this because he has this weakness, this weakness, this weakness, and this immobility. Right? I can look at somebody's thought and I can say, they think that this is true because of this weakness, this weakness, this weakness, and this cognitive immobility. And most people they can't do that. All they can do is recognize credentials because that's all the educational system trains people to do is recognize what an authority figure says, recognize who the authority figure is, and regurgitate what that is. And so guess what? That's not intelligence. And so obviously you will not have any unique ideas when you've never learned how to think, you've never learned how to ingest information and digest it in a coherent manner. And the only thing that you can come up with that you think approximates intelligence is actually an incoherent regurgitation of what somebody who you deem to be an expert said 6 months ago.
All right. This is what I'm talking about. You're very cogent, succinct about this. In terms of like, I think that a lot of people think what you think, but you had it pat like 3-4 minutes, whatever. You told me what's going on here. Do you think individual self cultivation and focus and self improvement, the kind of thing you've done naturally, the kind of thing you teach how to people to do? Do you think it was more natural in the pre modern age when you had to be a jack of all trades, you had your own farm, that sort of thing? I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I'd actually be that intelligent compared to somebody 100 years ago. But think about somebody 100 years ago, right? You work on a farm. Well, if you work on a farm, you see farm animals interacting, and guess what? The number one combatant to gender ideology is watching small farm animals interact. And you realize that, oh, there is definitely an innate difference between boys and girls, males and females. Um, and then, what happens when you work on a farm is you need to take your goods to market. So when you take your goods to market and you don't have a TI-89 calculator or an abacus, you need to learn how to do math. Otherwise, you get cheated, right? And so by the time somebody's 12 years old, a kid from 1870, by the time that kid's 12 years old, he's learned how to raise chickens on a farm, hop on a railroad train, take those eggs to a market, negotiate with buyers for money, right? He's learned all sorts of skills that people don't learn until they get an MBA now, right? How to count things, how to negotiate how to cultivate. So life was education for most people, even if these people couldn't read, right? So now our literacy rates are much higher, right? Most people can read words, but can they do anything with the words that they've read? No. And this is, to me, this is sort of one of the later stages of a capitalist system that rewards people and grows based on specificity of labor, right? When you have specificity of labor, you will cultivate a society that is increasingly nearsighted, right? Because labor specificity requires you to be ultra focused and nearsighted. But if everybody or a vast majority of people become ultra focused and very nearsighted, there's absolutely no way that we can function as a representative democracy because people just won't have the intelligence to select leaders that will do anything but screw them over.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what you're alluding to here is everyone's specializing. We're cogs in a machine,
Yeah.
and many of us do not see the whole machine, and yet we live in a representative democracy that presupposes that we are citizens and that we are integrated into the body politic. But the reality is, a lot of it. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I don't go to city council meetings. Like, wouldn't know where it is. I don't know where City Hall is. I know where the Capitol is here in Austin because you can't miss it. But I work. That's what I do. I work in the capitalist system. I pay my bills. I make money. I spend money. These are the things that I do. So I'm not part of local Austin politics and the citizenry here in Austin. And I'm just being honest about it, but I also think this is literally 98% of people in the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
And it's like, yeah, like, and so, I mean, how do we, I mean, you have a business, you have a career that's focused on helping people as individuals, right?
mm-hmm.
How do we scale this? How do we? I mean, there's all these self-help people, right? I'm going to use that word because that's the general genre. There's stoicism. It's a huge range. There's stoicism. There's like transcendental meditation. There's a whole Christian subgroup, whatever, and it's been around my whole life. And now we have Jordan Peterson talking to young men. We have all of these specialists for these particular, subgroups demographically. But we are a society that, is lacking some meaning. I mean, would you be a deep ecology person? Just be like, hey, we need to like hunt and farm and do that. That's what we're naturally evolved for. Like, what do you? I'm just kind of curious what your philosophy on this sort of thing is in a big picture. Aside from you yourself have obviously optimized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we get society to optimize? Like, have you thought about that?
Well, it's a very challenging question, and I'm not sure if we can because the DNA of our society sows the seeds of our own destruction, right? So capitalism is required for our society to function. But if you have capitalism go too fast or leverage technology too well, then it accelerates the aging of the machinery that advances with capitalism. And so, an example of that might mean, capitalism incentivizes producers to create goods and services that are desired by consumers. Right? Good. That's a good thing. Right? If that didn't happen, you wouldn't have groceries on the shelves. But if they got too good at it, then what they're going to end up doing is creating addictive products, right? Maybe not illegally addicting products, but products that are just on the cusp of being illegal. And if they're not illegal now, they will be in 20 years, right? The most profitable companies are doing something that isn't presently categorized as illegal, but probably should be, right? They're monopolies or near monopolies, selling addictive goods and services that haven't yet been classified as addictive by like the medical profession, possibly because they paid them off. And so there isn't a clear answer to, well, this is how we fix this. It's like, how do you fix death, right? Death is guaranteed. At the end of someone's life, that person will die, right? At the end of a society's growth arc, that society will fall, right? What is it? Tough times lead to strong men lead to good times lead to weak men lead to tough times. It's like, that's circular, and it exists because that's exactly how the human brain is wired, right? And so we are on the cusp of strong men leading to good times and good times leading to weak men, right? Weak times enable weak men to flourish, or good times enable weak men to flourish. And so how do we stop this is, well, the time's got to get tough. And we might not have to do anything. We might just have to wait, right? Wait for a banking collapse. Times are going to get tougher, right? And so when times get tougher, that's nature's way of healing. That's nature's way of washing away the excess. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of casualties, right? Perhaps myself included, right? Because that's a messy process. Washing away the excess can mean we're all living around drug addicts who can't get their Adderall prescriptions filled and end up driving cars next to us, right? So it's not to say that there's going to be any order or fairness into exactly who gets washed away, as society resets itself. But there is a restorative process to life, and as a culture becomes, too excessive, too opulent, too hedonistic, it ultimately always collapses under its own weight, and then the strong people pull themselves up and rebuild it.
Alex, have you read Spengler?
I don't read that much. This surprises people. So no, I have not.
I just wonder, it sounds like you're saying that societies grow, mature, decay, die. Are you of the opinion that our culture, American Republic, American civilization, like, what do you think? Where are we at? Are we at the tail end right now?
Oh, yeah. I don't. So what I can guarantee is that in 25 years, the United States will not exist in a fashion that is recognizable to people right now. It could legally exist as an entity and still be the largest GDP still somehow, but it won't be recognizable to people right now. Because think about it. Would 2023 America be recognizable to people in 1998 where, we're having, drag queen parties that are used as status symbols by a faction of the leading political party to determine how progressive they are in their acceptance of other forms of life? It's like, no, that would be a completely unrecognizable culture to somebody. And you told somebody from 1998, hey, the government's going to guarantee all banking deposits 15 years after bailing out every Wall Street bank, 4 years after creating more money than was created to fight both World War I and World War II combined, after shutting down the economy for 6 quarters in a row. And now we're in a real recession that the government's redefining as not a recession. A convicted pedophile was most likely killed in prison to avoid him speaking about the other political accomplices that he knew. It's like, if you told somebody that in 1998, they'd be like, what are you? Oh, and a couple planes got driven through the World Trade Center, and everything changed regarding checkpoints going to the airports right after that. And we're letting biological males compete in female sports. It's like if you told somebody from 1998 that all this stuff is going to be happening by 2023, they'd be like, what? Like, get out of here.
Well, okay. I think I mentioned this before. But Idiocracy was made in the middle, was already 2005, and
It's only
obviously some
18 years.
anachronisms. Yeah, it's like they have flip phones in there. They have flip phones, but like let's set this aside. In some ways, the world of Idiocracy, how do I say this, is less degenerated than our world in a lot of ways, actually. And the one of the biggest example is in the world of Idiocracy, they give people standardized tests, and they seek out the smartest. They seek out the person with the highest standardized test in the world to fix society's problems. And today we would just be like, standardized tests don't test anything, blah, 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 stupid stuff, right?
No, actually, like, so I think somebody suggested we use ChatGPT to figure out like how to solve the banking crisis, right? That's kind of the same thing.
I mean, I feel like we don't need artificial general intelligence because we ourselves are degrading from general intelligence as a society or something. You know what I'm saying? It's the machines don't really have to win. We're working really hard to lose. I don't want to be like whatever. Sometimes I get like black pill, super pessimistic about things, but it's really hard. Like we have affluence, we have obesity, we have a surfeit of calories. We have nice things. We have supercomputers in our pockets, and on the other hand, there is this ennui, this kind of just like sense that something is wrong in our society, up and down the class ladder, right? Like a lot of people don't know what the hell is going on in our culture, and you alluded to some of the things. I guess like as we're closing out here, Alex, you are focused on using your life example and scaling that forward, right? And so, I mean, like, what are your ambitions? Like, obviously, I mean, because you had like that. CrossFit, for example, those boxes are owned, I think, by the CrossFit organization or whatever, or licensed. There's a franchise. I mean, are you happy with just doing your thing individually and basically having like a consulting, where you consult for people and you give people advice as an individual and you capture that value? Or like do you have ambitions into the future of doing other things? I don't know.
No, I'd like to be able to do this at a greater scale. The challenge around fitness is the most lucrative offerings aren't that good, right? Because if they were that good, people, or they're not selling fitness entirely. Like CrossFit sells community, as much as it sells fitness. I'm not really as interested in selling community. I just want to help people get jacked. And CrossFit does work. So, we'll split fitness offerings into two, ones that work and ones that don't work. The ones that don't work make money because people continually come back to them and thinking that it's their fault that it didn't work the first time. Like, I don't know, Weight Watchers or something like that. And then the ones that do work make money because people are actually addicted to the community that comes with it, whether that's SoulCycle, whether that's Peloton, whether that's CrossFit. So if I wanted to make money in fitness, I would either need to make my product work less well, or I would need to develop community around it. And so maybe I can develop community around it. I don't know. That's a long ways away. I think the first step is creating like advertising around it, so I can get a little bit more leverage on the unit economics. Now, I would like to keep working with people as a life coach. I would like to be able to continue to do that. I'm already working with several, very intelligent type A individuals. And I think as they become more successful and they start referring me to their friends, I'll have greater access to higher power, higher performing individuals. And I can continue to help people in that regard. I think no matter how much money I make, I would always love to be a life coach. I think that the coolest thing that I can think of is like, living, maybe not in Hawaii after what they did during COVID, but if they didn't do that during COVID, like living in Hawaii and just having like really cool executives or entrepreneurs come and visit me for a week, 3 days, and we'll just do mindset work for 3 days. and then, work with one person every week. Um, have them cook, have them eat real good food, train with me, reset, and then go kick ass afterwards. That would be my goal. No matter how much money I had, if I had $1 billion, I'd love to do that. And so, if I design my life, it would probably be something approximating that.
Awesome. So I guess I'm gonna ask you one last question because it just came to me. I know you've trained and helped out a bunch of different types of people. Um, and your pictures are of you. Uh, I'm just curious, like, can you tell me the most salient thing about sex differences? I'm sure you've trained some women. Like, so I mean, I'll give you like my minor personal example. Back when I used to lift, I would lift with friends of mine, and female friends, and they would just start to like kind of get angry. I'm just in a joking way that like after 2 or 3 weeks, I'm showing gains, and like they're not showing any gains, right? That's just
Yeah.
called testosterone, I'm assuming. Can you just like talk a little bit about because we were talking about sex differences, like you see it, I'm sure, very very visibly. Like, what are the biggest things you see?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference in strength development. It takes women probably twice as long to hit strength maturity as it does for men, as far as years in the gym. But as far as I'm concerned, the biggest difference is actually cravings, where you'll find it much more common for men to just say, "I want to eat meat. I don't really have that much of a sweet tooth, but I just love eating steak." Like, great, I can help you out. Where it's much less common for women to say, "Yeah, I don't really crave sweets that much ever." Like, those women don't really exist. And so with my approach to fitness, it is imperative that the people I work with don't have crazy sugar cravings. Because if you have crazy sugar cravings, you can't eat intuitively. It's not going to work because you're just going to want more sugar. Um, so if you have your sugar cravings in check, it's much more likely that you're a male, right? And but it's also much more likely that my system is going to work for you. The other thing to keep in mind is most women should not have abs, right? And the standard that is set by Instagram, by fitness models, is like, should most men have abs? Maybe not, but I think probably 30% of men can carry abs without doing anything crazy, right? Maybe 50% of men can carry abs without doing anything, probably 50% actually. If you just kind of lived a 1960s lifestyle and trained, and you probably 50% of men, half, right? And the ones who didn't, like, would be kind of close. I think like 3% of women should naturally have abs. It's just not something that's like natural to a woman who wants to be like reproductively healthy. Some women can, but most women just should not be having abs. And the amount of dieting that they need to do to get those abs is not healthy frequently. Whereas, like, I don't do any dieting in a conventional sense, and you can't convince me that I'm calorically deprived or hormonally imbalanced. But if you found a woman whose midsection looked like mine, very good chance that that woman's not doing something healthy to achieve that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm just having that thought, like, what would I think? What would I say? How would I avert my eyes? It's like, what is going on with you there, lady? Yeah, no, well, so it's been great talking to you. People can find you, and I'll put the links, like social media. You have an Instagram. Do you have a website?
I do,
I'm
but
assuming you.
more of my interesting stuff is on YouTube and on Twitter and on Instagram.
Okay,
So
I know about the Twitter and the. Actually, I think I have seen your YouTubes before, but yeah. So yeah, I'll link to all of those. And you're very accessible. I
yeah,
feel like on social media. You can be a little spicy sometimes, so if people don't want to deal with the spice, don't go there. But it's great, and I hope people have enjoyed this conversation. I know I really appreciate your feed and just learning from each other. That's one of my favorite things. And just looking at you, it makes me feel fat, and that's actually motivating. I'm not gonna lie. So thank you very much, Alex.
no, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Razib.
This podcast for kids